I've got to repair a car. We pulling stuff off and off and then you put it back the same way, yeah?
Disassembly is not a synonym for repair.
I can disassemble.
Yes.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Ordinary Council meeting on Tuesday, the 22nd of August, 2023. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the Kaurna people as the traditional custodians of the land. City of Prospect acknowledges that we are on the traditional country of the Kaurna people of the Adelaide Plains region. We pay our respect to elders past, present and emerging. We recognise and respect their cultural heritage, beliefs and relationships with the land, and we acknowledge that they are of continuing importance to the Kaurna people living today. I'd now like to read the council pledge. We seek wisdom and thank you. We seek wisdom and understanding as we face the duties of our united task, praying for the peace and prosperity of our city. Okay, item number 2 on leave, we have Neil. Item number 3, apologies, we have Neil. Item number 4, declaration by members of a conflict of interest. Are there any conflicts of interest? There are none. Number 5, confirmation of minutes. Can I have a mover to confirm the minutes of the previous council meeting? So moved. Do I have a seconder? I don't think there's any debate. All those in favour? I'll go. Carried unanimously. Item number 6, public question time. Just to go over how this works, there's a maximum of 15 minutes available, 3 minutes per person. Are there any questions from members of the public? Yes. I would like to approach the table. We'll need your name and address, please.
Certainly. Peter Donnelly, 1 Carter Street, Thorngate, South Australia.
Thanks, Peter.
Again, 5 minutes.
3 minutes.
3 minutes. Okay.
Yeah. Just give us 2 seconds. I'm just going to get my trusty stopwatch out. Ready, set, go.
Yeah, I made a presentation to you on the 28th of March about car parking in Carter Street. And I felt I needed to come back and follow up with that. After that, and I put forward then to check the minutes, the history of how we were involved in the main street with Mario Russell and so on. Sam and Kelsey came and saw us on the after that meeting on the Tuesday, the 4th of April, about 9 o'clock in the morning. While I was standing there, non-Prospect community person parked in front of our place, went to court the bus, which is what this whole issue is about. That we have limitation over on the corner, particularly number 1. There's a limited space. When I spoke to you in March, I said my daughter-in-law was heavily pregnant. We now have another grandson who unfortunately caught a virus in the hospital when he was born. And for a number of days, they were actually into intensive care and back. And we had to therefore have the other grandchild drop then, and she's going back to work. And so we have a problem again, still the same problem, where that is a difficulty for her to be able to find a car park, deal with a newborn baby, deal with a 4-year-old, and comfortably walk into our place rather than having to tramp halfway down Carter Street. There was a survey done last year. We had to have that completed by early December. And when I spoke to you in March, we hadn't had any results. Then finally came out, then there was a bit of an issue. And some clarity on some points. Another survey. I think it's the 4th survey that's been done for 1 street in Prospect. And we haven't officially received any results from that survey. I think there were 16 responses. I spoke to Sam about 2 weeks ago on the phone. I think there were about 16 responses and sent out only about 2 or 3 as far as I know at that stage replied. And there had been no negative feedback at that stage. So I would assume that if people didn't get fired up and reply to the council in a negative, they were agreeing to what we'd ask for was time parking in the street. I've got properties in 4 different councils. I've had responses when I've had issues with other things within a week or 2 from some of the other councils. This is going on for nearly a year. My question is, can we please have a resolution that takes the stress off a resident, a community council rate paying resident that is looking after the community and not people outside the community. I don't think it's really sensible that it's gone on from doing it. Fine.
Thank you. Thanks, Peter. Okay, do we have any further questions from members of the public? Would you like to approach the bench? So I'll need your name and address, please.
Angela Mackay, 3 Carter Street, Salford.
Thank you. And I'm going to start the timer for your question now.
Okay, the last survey that we had to complete was by the 14th of June, so that's over 2 months ago, and we've heard nothing. I'd like to relate to the incident that I had where a person decided to do permanent parking outside our house, which is slightly different. Normally, we just provide free car parking to commuters who want to work in the city. I had a man who parked his car outside my house, and it was there for over 2 months. Peter very kindly rang the police and told them that they said that the car's registered, there's nothing wrong with it, and he can just park it there for as long as he likes. I did get hold of him, and he promised to come and collect it within 3 days. 2 weeks later, I rang him and said, when are you going to come and collect it? He finally came to get it after it had been parked outside my house for over 2 months. And when he tried to start it, the battery was flat. He was then inside calling the RAA. They came down. It's a very old car. They said, you're going to have to let it sort of just sit there and idle for a while. While he was doing that, I was getting in water because the radiator was empty as well. He finally said, I think it's okay. Got in the car to drive off, and unfortunately, sort of by mistake, switched the initial key, turned it off, and then it wouldn't start again. So we then had to wait for the RAA to come back a second time. I was involved with him outside the front of my house for 4 hours. When I finally got him up and running, I actually got in the car with him and actually drove him down to show him somewhere that he could actually park free. And I've got his phone number and told him that I actually will ring him if they actually decide to ever put in time parking. His car is still there now, which means he's been using the free car parking for over 4 months. But if I hadn't forced the issue, he would have been parked outside my house for 4 months. And while I am a bit of a sucker for a really good looking Greek fellow, I think it is actually stretching the friendship a little bit too much when people actually think they can park their cars permanently outside our house.
You've got 20 seconds left. And
Okay,
what is the question?
our other commuters are still parking there. The guy from Mawson Lakes and the guy from Salisbury, they don't live in the city of Prospect. Why are you providing them free commuter parking? Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Are there any further questions from members of the public? That being the case, we'll move on to item 7, petitions to renewal. I don't think we did that. Not for, there's no deputation.
Questions,
I don't think we've done no day. Like, that's us for that.
unless the members present is up for them. Okay. That's okay.
So item number 7, petitions to renewal. Item number 8, deputations to renewal. Item number 9, questions without notice. Are there any questions without notice, Councillor Becker?
Yeah. It was just in regard to the recent release of the Greater Adelaide Regional Plan discussion paper. I sent around an email earlier this week after attending an elected member briefing session. I'm just wondering, through the chair, if we're providing any communications to our community about the upcoming the events that are available to the community to attend through our Prospect channels.
So yeah,
So the answer to that is yes, but for details, Ms. Taylor, can you expand upon what our plans are there?
Certainly, so it's already been released by our socials with the links. There is an information package to become from the department. We're actually still waiting on it. So we're sort of holding off until that provides probably the, I guess, templates and toolkits for us to provide that information for our doing.
Just one more question. I'm aware that there is possibly a scheduled workshop in September. Have we got a confirmed date so that interested members from our community can attend in the gallery?
CEO.
Ms Taylor?
Is that, sorry, through the chair, sorry, is that, just to clarify, is that the workshop on that particular plan?
Yes.
I refer to.
We might have to take that on a notice
Yeah.
if we can, because that's something we haven't discussed internally yet. It's a good idea. We need to talk about it.
Thank you, Councillor De Backer. Any further questions from Councillor Barnett?
Yes, we've just had questions from the president, public question time. So my question is, do we have any idea of when the president's going to have a response back about the department?
CEO.
Mr Delano?
Through the chair, that consultation process is closed and unless the results have been analysed, a letter has been drafted and is sent out. The results of the consultation of what's being proposed.
Thank you, Councillor Barnett. Any further questions or stuff? Councillor Group.
I was actually going to ask the same question, but I'll ask a different one. Just in terms of parking on streets where there is no time parking, what are the restrictions in terms of how long someone can park in a street? And are they rules that are set by council or set by the state government?
CEO.
Mr Delano?
I'm not across the specifics with respect to from that regulatory perspective. So I know from a regulatory and parking sign perspective, I've been asked those questions. I'm just not across that. I'm sorry, Councillor. It's more like enforcement and other things, not part of my business.
Mr Pearce, are you able to add anything to that?
Yeah, through the mayor, look, we are able to police or to give notices for vehicles that are, for example, not registered or abandoned. But if there is sufficient evidence to suggest that the vehicle is used and it's within the law, the vehicle can remain parked in those sorts of streets that are subject to time zone. Yeah, if the car is not, either abandoned or unregistered. So we'd always look up the registration and determine that. But it's very unrestricted.
Thank you. Councillor Gwynn.
I've got a question for Angela. The person that's parking there, is that a resident in Prospect?
The person who parked the car in front of my house for 4 months? No, he was from Melbourne. And what had happened was he'd come over to work in Adelaide.
We wouldn't normally allow questions to them.
Well, can I answer it?
Very, very briefly.
He has come over to work in Adelaide. He's working in the city. He's living in a place in the city that has no car parking. So he drove out through North Adelaide, got to Churches Street. That's all time parking. Carter Street's the first one. So he just parked in front of my house. I was lucky that he left his phone number. Or otherwise I wouldn't have been able to contact him.
Thank you. Any further questions without notice? Councillor De Backer.
Just in following up to Councillor Groot's question, and thank you very much for the questions around the table. I think back on the 5th of June of this year, I sent an email to the CEO, Councillor Groot and Councillor Mia Larwood in regards to there's local government documents and guidance papers on removal of vehicles, and in that they refer to standard operating procedures. And I did ask in that email if we do have a standard operating procedure for guidelines in the event of abandoned vehicles. So I'll resend that email, but that might shed some light on this. But I don't know, do we have a standard operating procedure in regards to abandoned vehicles?
So yeah,
Mr. Pearce, are you able to answer
So
that?
that on notice, where we have a particular procedure on that, go through there. But I can say that if, we get queries about vehicles that appear abandoned, we go through the process that I mentioned before, find out the owner, contact the owner and find out if it's been left there, or back there, or we make a decision about what is abandoned versus what is parked. And act accordingly.
I might add to that. I have previously attempted to prosecute the owners of abandoned vehicles, and where those vehicles are registered, even if it's quite patently obvious that they're undrivable, those prosecutions have failed. So if the vehicles are road registered and parked in an untimed space, as long as they're not parked across the driveway or not within a certain distance of an intersection, those road rules related parking restrictions that don't apply, it apply even if the signage isn't in place. If they're legally parked in an untimed space, there's very, very little you can do about it at law, which is a challenge for us. And obviously that's something that's regulated by state legislation. There's limits to what we can do.
thank you. Any further questions with that notice? Okay, let's move on to item 10, reports for decision. Neil. Item,
First time ever.
first time.
Yeah, it is.
Item number 11, general business urgent items. Are there any urgent items that people would like to raise? Councillor Nelson and Councillor Drew. Going alphabetical order. Reverse. Councillor Nelson.
Yes, thank you. Mel. I would like the
First
mayor,
of all, why is it, if you can confirm why it's urgent?
of course, I'd like the mayor to consider hearing on a matter I do consider urgent due to the requirement of advanced procurement and event organisation timelines required for the proposed community events at Christmas time.
Yeah, I'm happy to accept that.
And fantastic. I do have a pre-drafted motion. Hopefully that is up there, just around discussions. On around April of this year, during a budget workshop, we reduced the Christmas decorations budget from $35,000 back to $15,000 and reserved the remaining $20,000 for our community Christmas event. In the July council meeting, we heard a deputation from Stephanie Ferretti, a long-time organiser of the ever popular Santa's Coming to Prospect event. In the deputation, she presented an idea to expand the event this year to include a road closure, have more businesses involved and make the event much larger for the benefit of the Prospect community. She's calculated a budget of approximately $45,000 for the event. I would like to propose to council that we allocate the $20,000 from the event budget to this event with the support of council.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. So I take it you'd like to move that motion?
Yes, please.
Do I have a seconder? Sorry, yeah. Yeah, I'll take questions now, sorry.
Yeah, so just a question on process. So just to clarify, the $20,000 that's proposed, I'm assuming is already in the budget.
It's in,
Yes.
I believe it's in
Yeah.
the budget, yes.
Just by way of process, my understanding that the decision making around this was delegated to the director. I may be misunderstood that, because I understand there's potentially other applicants for the said amount of money. So maybe through the chair to the director.
The question is,
The decision making, so there's like a bit like community grants. You know, there's a sum of money and then applicants apply for that sum of money and they might get allocated a percentage or whatever based on the merits set by the director. So I'm just wondering through the chair to the director, if this undermines any existing process within the budget.
so how was staff planning on
Yes.
dealing
okay, yes.
with the $20,000 if it wasn't for this motion coming to us?
Probably backpedaling. There's already a transparent governance process. So it's a bit like us just going on, this is the Australian of the year. We can't really do that. There's a process. So it's there's nothing wrong with raising it, but I'm just wondering about the governance process in us. If it's here with the director, us going over the head of someone to allocate funds.
And see,
Ms. Taylor, how were you planning to utilise this budget? If in the event this motion fails to proceed, how are you planning to utilise this budget?
Through the chair. So this is an operating project. in our budget. So looking forward, I was looking at doing an expression of interest across the community. And I guess in a governance process, looking at it from a whole of community equitable kind of approach. I know the council has spoken quite, I guess, strategically around community capacity. So I was going to look at, I guess, opening expression of interest up to a community events that are already existing to sort of help build them and support council and the community in that process. I have been approached by a couple of other community organisations already, but they came and met with me and they didn't come and do a deputation as this already took the liberty to do. So that was my thinking, my planning. My team has already started to put some planning around that. However, it is a normal operating project in the way that council approved it through the budget process.
Can I add to that? It's a matter for council. So it's an operating project budget. The director has a plan on how to execute that through an expression of interest process, but if council are minded to take a different approach, there's still time. We haven't executed an EOI, so it is open to council to determine how to spend those funds.
Thank you, councillor Becker. Any further questions before we? Okay, so we've got a mover. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Nguyen would like to speak to the motion.
Yeah, I'd like to second that and support it. I think it is a great event that, it's getting bigger and bigger every year, and should put so much work into this. So the extra funding would definitely help.
Thank you. Has anyone else got anything further to add? Councillor Greg.
So I've probably got a question. I'm not sure who this is to, but if this fails and the money remains in the budget, I presume that any expression of interest process won't be enough time for anyone to do a new event. It would only be supporting existing events. I'll phrase that as a question, perhaps.
I'd suspect so. I think the process of getting an EOI out and reviewed and responded to would take us 6 to 8 weeks at least, I'd imagine. And then you're getting pretty close to when things need to start happening.
Yeah.
Would that be, I might throw that question, what would the timeframes be for an EOI to be drawn up, advertised?
Ms. Taylor?
For the chair, I think you're about right, 6 to 6 weeks. We were trying to focus on existing events that are out there. There's some really great community events already around Christmas time. So those who have approached us already around just, it's not always large amounts of money, but just that extra additional support that helps their fundraising capacity.
Thank you.
The second question I had, I'm not sure if Councillor Nelson said this, and I think he might have, I just want to check. In terms of the overall cost of the event, I'm not sure whether that was mentioned, but this is obviously a contribution to the event. My question would be, what happens if the rest of the money can't be raised? What happens to this? Because I'd hate to see us commit to this and then for it not to go ahead because the rest of the money can't be raised, and then kind of everyone misses out because it'd be too late then to run an EOI for existing events. So because I obviously was here for the deputation, I've heard what was said, but I'm just not sure how the extra money is going to be procured. Maybe I'll leave that as a philosophical question, or maybe it'll be covered in something up, but I'd just be interested in that. So in the absence also of understanding who else has put their hand up for this, I don't have that visibility. This does seem to be a good use of the funds. It does go a little bit against our normal processes around how we allocate funds, but it's in the overall budget terms, it's a small amount of money. And I would be interested though to understand what those other events might be. I'm not going to ask, it's a question someone else might choose to. On the balance of that, I would support it, but I am a little bit concerned about the process though as well.
Thank you. Any further debate? Councillor Tweenham.
I think initially I was I was going to support this, but then again, I'm thinking in terms of transparency and equity, I don't think that's, in terms of process, I just don't think it's fair to the other community groups. Yeah, so this is going to be a hard one for me. I'm a bit uncomfortable about making a decision. But, you know, I can understand, like, on the grounds of, you know, when Stephanie came in and did her deputation, you know, it's a community event where it's, you know, community members love it and, you know, she puts so much effort into it, but just in terms of equity, I just don't think this is the right process.
Thank you. Any further debate?
Yeah, I've asked a question.
You asked a question, you're okay to speak,
Yeah.
councillor.
Yeah, so, you know, thank you for taking this on, and I've had many discussions with the director, enabling the community to deliver events. I think it's a great way to deliver events within the community, but I'd hate to think in moving this motion if somehow, you know, like our other clubs, that we haven't gone through a process. It doesn't mean that in this failing, that it can't still go ahead, it will just have to go through the process. And I think that reassures the community and also the staff that due diligence has gone through and we can make sure we can deliver that. A bit like Councillor Groot says, you know, with the surety that the other part of funding is able to be provided.
Councillor Bayer.
Yes, I mean, we had the deputation and I've seen evidence of how well Stephanie organises the markets, events and things like that. And I'm sure like some other elected members, I've had met and had a chat with her, but I did have my concerns about the actual time frame for planning such a much bigger and expanded event, and with all you know, street closures and, you know, having the cars, you know, I sort of thought about like, well, where are they going to be parked, you know, and all that. So she's still seeming to have quite a lot of work to do. And again, knowing that there are other groups, it does, I know how, if I put myself in the shoes of some of those other groups and found that this had sort of jumped the queue, even though it's very worthy cause, I don't know how I would really answer them. So that's my dilemma, I think like some of the others. I made the assumption that her event in the smaller way will go ahead, that there'll still be one. That will be supportive. This is for an expansion and much bigger one. I would just be far more comfortable that if I had assurance that tonight that there were more planning issues that were still understood to be resolved. So yeah, so I think at this moment, I think I'll have to vote against it. As much as it pains me, because I know it could be a really good event, but it's just, you know, like, social justice, but you know, like in being transparent and being a fair and equitable process. That's my main concern. Yeah. So, okay.
Thank you. Any further discussion, councillor Stanley?
Yeah, I'm still going to support this motion. We hear a lot in this chamber about supporting people that get up and try things and do things themselves and contribute. And we talk about supporting those who want to have a go themselves. And I think this is a good case in point. This isn't completely giving someone the money. This is, from what I can understand, a like for like or pretty much close to it. And the event is being supported financially by someone who's got out there, gone and knocked on all the doors up and down the street and is putting some money in themselves. And I think from small things, big things grow. And if we want a Christmas event in Prospect, I think this is an incredibly cost-efficient way of doing it, because someone else is doing all the effort and someone else is putting in half the money. And I think, I don't know, I understand all the government part of it, and I understand all those other concerns, but I think this is an opportunity that we should take on board and we should support.
Thank you, councillor Stanley. Councillor Hall, you're the only one who hasn't tried to add some
I've,
commentary.
I do think it's being an existing event and expanding on it. I think it is something that would likely be quite successful, and someone is committed and, you know, obviously has put a lot of planning into what they want to do. So I see a lot of good in it. I do have a few other concerns that have been raised, and then there's also, you know, what happens next year? Does it become a recurring, you know, do we put 20,000 in next year as well? Because once you have a successful event, there's an expectation that it happens again. So, you know, I think I'd support it, but I would have liked some discussion prior to this motion going in. And that opportunity, you know, wasn't there, but it is something I'd like to see happen. But that's probably my biggest concern. There will be an expectation that it's next year if it's a success, and the year after, so it becomes almost a recurring 20,000. Yeah, I've taken on all the points everyone's raised, and they're all really valid, including the, you know, if there's a shortfall, what happens there? I suppose I would have preferred that discussion before now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you got a question?
I've got a very brief question if I can. Budget review process number 1's coming up. I heard from the director that there's small amounts now being asked for by the community groups. Is there any capacity in budget review one that we're aware of that could satisfy those other requests?
So yeah,
It's pretty early, Ms. Moon. Anything you can point your finger to?
It is pretty early at this point in time, and traditionally budget review one is about capturing the carry forward to the new financial year. I won't be able to. Budget adjustment can be done anytime, doesn't have to wait.
Yeah.
But I think what councillor Groot's asking, Deputy Mayor's asking, have we identified any savings opportunities this early in the year that could?
It is pretty early. Another month up here.
I'll ask you again in October.
And November.
I think everyone's spoken. From the chair, the conversation around the table has been some concerns around governance on one side of the coin, and is this a transparent process? The other side of the ledger has been that this is a fantastic event that's been built up from the bootstraps by a local business, and has come to us with an idea which will be a winner should it get the opportunity to live itself out. I think in hindsight we might have locked in a way of dealing with this $20,000 a bit earlier, because if this hadn't come to us at this point in time, then we may still be wondering what we might do with it, and we might be scrambling to spend that money. So I think on balance it might be, in this instance, better to back a winner that we can see in front of us rather than risk the money going towards things that might not be as successful. I'd like to ask Councillor Nelson to sum up, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I've heard everything we've had to say, and a lot of those things have a lot of merit. Miss Freddie has a lot of support from the local businesses. There's a lot of support from the local community. We constantly sit around this table and we encourage the community to manage their own events, rather than relying on council to run events for them. This is that opportunity. It's a perfect opportunity to allow the community to support itself with a relatively small amount of funding. Understanding that some smaller groups may also want to seek funding, I certainly appreciate that. But you know, Ms. Freddie used great initiative to come forward to us and undertake a deputation to get that support. We can only hope that the event is a great success, as it has been for the past few years in a much smaller scale. Future events may then attract even greater funding from outside sources. In the past year, Ms. Freddie, for last year's event, managed to get the local member, Lucy Hood, as well as a premier here, of which she's also guaranteed that they'll both be attending for this year. So I believe it is a great use of the funds. I think we would still be able to find some smaller funds there for other community groups, and I do truly hope that we all support it.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. Let's put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? That motion carried. 6-2. Okay, councillor Group, you have an item of an urgent nature. Can you tell us why it's urgent, please?
So the item is in relation to an approach made to me by Rotary some months ago, and there's been some confusion as to the process best to deal with this issue. And so it's urgent on the basis that they are very keen for an outcome of this particular project. And rather than wait another month to bring it as a formal motion.
I'm happy to accept that.
Thank you.
So have you got a motion for us to consider?
I do. It's going to appear on the screen in a matter of, I'll start talking to it. So look, this is really quite straightforward, to be honest. So the Rotary Club approached me a little while ago around their Peace Pole project. So they're turning 100 this year in South Australia, and they're installing what's called peace poles across the state in celebration of that, which is part of their mandate around peace. They've already installed one in, I think it's Prospect North Primary School, and they would like another one which is sitting at home with me at the moment, and I should brought it in tonight to show you. It's an aluminium pole, about 10 centimetres by 10 centimetres with peace messages on the side, and they want to install it in St Helens Park. So this started off as being a fairly simple task to do under delegation, but we actually have a policy that requires this to go to council for any monuments and parks and gardens. So it's a very discreet pole, as it's aluminium. It's about 1.5 metres high. They're keen to install it. It's at no cost to council. They've procured the pole. Obviously, we need to work with council staff around the location of that St Helens Park. But as we have with the Peace Park across the road, it's really just a message of peace within the community. And something that I would endorse to the council. The motion, which is on the screen now, is really just to liaise with Prospect Rotary to install the sign and ensure that the small memorial policy is a future as part of that process, which I think wouldn't be a problem either end from Rotary. And I'm really keen to get some support for this so we can get this happening in the next 4 to 6 weeks.
Thank you. I'll deem that having been moved.
Oh, I'll move it.
I already deemed it. It's
Thank
too late. Can I have a seconder, please? I'm going to go councillor Stanton.
Sounds like a great idea.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you. Is there any further debate, any further discussion that hasn't already been covered?
Just
Councillor
a
Nelson.
question, if I may, any safety issues with regards to the size, height, or installation techniques of the pole?
It's covered with barbed wire to ensure that no one can touch it. It's got a point, no.
Is that for the chair?
Sorry, through the chair. Sorry, I can't even speak. Can I? What am I doing?
No. I think it's a reasonable question, probably to tag onto that, the decision around the location. CEO, so question around any potential health and safety issues, and also I'm assuming we would have the final say with regards to the location.
So I might ask Mr. Delano to take this on in a moment, but make a few observations. First, it's not the first pole of this kind to be installed. There's quite a few that have been installed. I think the design is fairly innocuous. My understanding is that there's very little from a safety standpoint to be concerned about. But we do have a policy, and I do want to take this opportunity to apologise to you, Councillor Griff, my failure to understand that we actually have a policy on small memorials and parks. We will follow the policy requirements in terms of installation. Mr. Delano, anything to add?
Other than we need to be conscious of both ways, but I think the second right in consultation with Rotary. Sorry, it's good.
That's it.
That's it. Thank you. Great. So we've got a second to any further discussion. Doesn't look like it. Back to you, Councillor Group, for a fine summary.
The fine summary is thank you for your consideration of this matter. I think it's a good part, a good opportunity to support a community group in our community. Been talking about that for the last motion as well, and commend it to you.
Thank you. Well, let's go to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Carried unanimously. Thank you, everybody. Any other items of an urgent nature? No, in the case, let's move on to item 12, reports for information. So there are 4 reports. 1, 2, 3, 4. We can resolve these en bloc. But I'll first ask if anyone would like to pull out any of these reports for discussion. Councillor Tobacco, you like to pull out?
All 3 of them, except for Merrill Buffett report. 3 of them.
And the reason being?
There are things I would like to address. So one is communications between strategic plan in relation to the next meeting and governance about the Arts Action Network in regards to the strategic plan as well.
Great, okay, thank you. In that case, we will move item 12.4 on block, we'll just remove it. Could I have a mover for the Merrill monthly activity reports? A bit sparse this month, but looking forward to having a more fulsome activity report in the next coming month. Councillor Green, I think, and a seconder. All those in favour? Against? Unanimously. Okay. So item 12.1, customer service project update is a recommendation that we receive and note the report. Councillor, or would I come up and move it for the report? Okay. Would you like to speak to the report or ask questions, Councillor Becker?
Yes, I will. So just thank you for the I think it was
Yeah.
yeah, so thank you very much. This is for those of you that maybe haven't got into the detail of it. This is at the crux of kind of what we do, and maybe through the chair, I'd like to ask Peter, the author or the CEO, in regards to some of the online systems that you've introduced. How are we seeing that in terms of our efficiencies? So I noticed things about, for example, our managing some of our building works, you know, like we've got Rosemont, Harrington all going through. And my understanding from reading the report, you've gone from, say, an emailing back and forth system to actually some sort of online system. Is that correct?
So yeah, so I might ask Mr. Pearce actually take this one. There's a couple of processes you're trying to capture here. Some of them sit in Mr. Pearce's space, some of them sit in Ms. Moon's space, and cover off also into Mr. Delana's space as well. So at a high level, the process I think you're referring to is our process around 221 permits, which was actually one that council considered back in January and has really changed the way we address permitting, in particular with large developers. Mr. Pearce, would you like to say a few words about that process and how it's progressing?
Through Mayor, just a summary on the 221 permit process. We have a project group which consists of administration staff from infrastructure and community standards. At this, our development assessment manager, Scott McCluskey, chairs that. I oversee it as the project sponsor. What we've done is instituted these new deeds with developers and I guess the first one, as you're aware, was the Harrington. That deed has been formalised, signed off and executed, and now the system through administration is such that we are invoicing a developer for occupation of public realm and incentivising the developer with an agreed set of standards and criteria which are outlined in the deed to conform to the standards required of them in the deed. Those standards basically cover off two main areas, that is the Local Nuisance Act, confirming or minimising issues such as drag out, noise, dust, etc. And also the other area is parking of subcontractors. So in the case of the Harrington, we've been very pleased. We have had one or two small incidents, but that deed is working. The fees we will raise over the course of the project are significant. I won't quote them in a public forum because it's a private document between council and the developer. But the good news is that developer is conforming to all of those behaviours, and the incentive has been applied in the first couple of meetings to the developer. That has also then carried on to a couple of other case study developments that we are using and rolling out this system with quite successfully. It's not perfect. We're tweaking it, we're refining it. But what it's doing is it's creating an income stream to the council to enable us to rectify parking issues but also it's fundamentally creating a better space for residents and less complaints for you as elected members. So I'll say largely at this stage, it's a 9.5 out of 10 the way it's working. And I think it's always scope for improvement in the process, but very, very pleased with it. We shall come back to the council with a formal summary and report showing a case study of 3 or 4 different developments, probably by either the end of this year, December. I think we committed to do it 12 months inside 12 months since we kicked it off in January. So the end of this year seems about right for that. We'll summarise the commercials, the legals, and most of all the social benefits.
2 things I'd like to add to that before John goes. First, to give John and Scott and the team a pat on the back, because massive amount of work's gone into this process. Also to point out that I had a meeting with Metro CEOs 2 weeks ago, and almost all of them are jealous and envious and want to get on board with a similar process in their councils. This is an area where we're genuinely innovating, and I think it's one where we may even, I reckon we should win an award for it this year at the Local Government Awards. It's a really good, look, again, not perfect process, but compared to what we had before, much better. The other thing too is there's been a lot of, and to your point, Councillor, around electronic systems, improvements in the back end associated with this process around payment of fees on permits. So John, I'm not sure if you'd like to add a little bit on that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, through your CEO and the Mayor, we have instituted a process that ultimately Utopia and why I gave us a 9.5 out of 10 is that other half is really not quite finished yet, where we want to streamline and systemize and digitize it. So we run a system called Authority that DAs are processed through. We want that DA application to match in with applications for permits, so public realm occupation, driveway crossovers, all of those things that require permits. We want the 2 systems to mesh, and then the generation of invoices to come from the system as well. So all digitized. At the moment, there's still, paper handling in the process, and we're gradually moving that across into a software system and a platform that we have in the business called Authority, which is part of the Civica platform that we use. And to streamline that takes some disciplines to shift the behaviours of administration staff from just flying the plane to build a better plane so that we're more efficient moving forward. And the aim is system improvement as well as the public realm stuff that we've been talking about before. So internally, we become, we remove friction points basically through the internal customer experience. And ultimately, we should be able to do it all online. Invoices are generated automatically, debtors are recovered through finance, and it's a system that has improved the whole experience in council as well as external.
To that degree, though, it's also worth pointing out that 2 years ago, as some returning members may recall this, all these permits were dealt with via paper and email, and 3/4 of them weren't invoiced until after the work was complete. So you can imagine how many of those we recovered. Now, at least most of the day-to-day ones are already in Authority and coming through the electronic system and being done in a timely fashion, which is a huge step forward. And obviously the improvements in the bigger process and the need to invoice those on a performance basis is what John's talking about in terms of adding that to the system. So a lot of progress has been made, still some progress to go, but it's a huge advance in our capability, which seems like a small hop in any other sector, but for us, this has been a big deal, Thank you, John.
Okay, any further questions? Okay, so we're looking for a seconder. Councillor Nelson, would you like to speak to the motion?
I'm happy with the report.
Okay, has anybody else got anything to add that hasn't already been covered, Councillor Stanton?
I've got a quick question to the relevant director. It says in here, this is service review. I'm in the right section here. Yep.
Yes.
Talks about 70% of customer phone calls are answered within 10 seconds. Is that answered by a person or is that through to the threaded message? Or the selection process?
So yeah,
I believe that's by a person, Ms. Taylor, yes?
Through the Mayor, that's correct.
Cool. That's great.
thank you. Anything else? Any further debate? Okay, I'll head back to Councillor Backer for a summary. Good. Okay, let's put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Carried unanimously. Item 12.2, draft strategic community plan update. Do I have a mover? Councillor Rebecca, thank you. Would you like to speak to the motion?
Yeah, I would. Look, I think it's really important that it's pulled out, only because we had 3 elected members not present at the last workshop session. So I've actually watched the full 3 hours, which is available to both here and there. And it was really exciting to see. So thank you to the members that did attend and threw out all those really good ideas. I guess I'm really interested with the Greater Adelaide discussion paper, which is actually re-looking at our corridors. It's re-looking at infill. And I think some of the consultation done to date has been really good at all those community wants. And we had a great presentation at the last workshop in Corinne, what's Corinne's last name? Garrett. On all the needs. All the wants and the needs and how we fund that. So I think there's still in the next meeting, which is in September, I believe. That's a workshop, yeah. It'd be really interesting to flesh out how that all integrates, because I think, I think reading through this, I think it's really exciting, but one of the things I'm really keen to see, we've got the word future funding in there, but I'm really interested in how that translates to economic development and investment attraction, which has driven a lot of what's happened in Prospect to date. So, look, I'm really interested in any other comments people had on the strategic planning today, but certainly what I saw in the video was really exciting.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Nelson, would you like to speak to the motion?
No, again, happy with the report.
Has anybody else got anything else to add that hasn't been covered already? That being the case, I'll go back to Councillor Rebecca for a summary. Let's put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Carried unanimously. Item 12.3, review of current governance of City of Prospects Arts Action Network and Citywide Public Art Roundtable. Do I have a mover? Councillor Barnett, would you like to speak to the motion?
I think it was brought to the PAN meeting, which Councillor Nguyen and I attended. There was some discussion, about it. I think it's just good to have this come back with some of us had some queries and that I think they've probably been answered with this report.
Thank you, Councillor Barnett. Do I have a seconder? So Trin's hand first. Councillor Trin Nguyen would like to speak to the motion.
No.
Thank you. Is there any further debate? Councillor Rebecca.
Yeah, look, I think it's been good to readdress this, and I think there's some fantastic things that happen out of both of the bodies. But just to reference to page 41, it's down the bottom. It was highlighted through the council workshop that improved information sharing is needed to ensure all council members are kept updated with group's activities. Subsequently, meeting notes will be consistently forwarded by a CEO update when available. I think that's really good, just to make sure that they're kept up to date. It was great to see the butterfly installation down in Charles Kane. It looks amazing, so good, and it's just seeing how art can bring life to some of those precincts. I know I'm attending, I think the meeting tomorrow night. I haven't got an agenda yet, so I'm really keen to see how we're kind of shaping our agendas to match in with some of the other infrastructure projects that we've got at the moment. But I think in going through this process, it's just highlighted how we can maybe tie it back to better communication and also tying in with our strategic plan as well.
Good point. Okay, any further discussion? If not, I'll head back to Councillor Barnett for a summary.
No.
We're good. Okay, let's put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Carried unanimously. Okay, item 13 on the agenda, council member reports and briefings. Are there any reports and briefings having been received? And then motions on notice. Oh, sorry, did I go too quickly?
It's okay. I did send mine through to Mel, so.
Yeah.
Hopefully they'll be up there shortly. So just briefly, I attended the public town of Walkerville public meeting with Councillor Standen. Which was actually very informative, a couple of football games, the usual cat meeting. And a very informative GARP team session last Wednesday.
Thanks, councillor Nelson. Any other? Councillor Holly.
I attended a sponsors and vice president lunch at the Broadview Football Club early August. That was actually because it was their last function at the club before they move into the new one.
Mm.
There were some of the attendees were past presidents, you know, just a lot of people from the past, and there's a lot of reminiscing stories and history of the club in previous years. That was really
Yeah, it's a good
a
show.
nice afternoon. And we also donned the fluorescent vests and hard hats and got a bit of a tour of the new building, and looks quite impressive. I think
That's
it'll
good.
turn out very nice.
Thank you. I think I had councillor Rebecca and then
Oh, the consent it through to Deb, but I don't have the need to contact the city, but yeah, basically it's just also as stated on the Greater Adelaide Regional Planning briefing session by team. Spoken to that already.
thank you. Councillor Barnett.
Yes, on the 16th of August this year, obviously. I attended the community steering committee meeting, and so along with councillor and the mayor, no, councillor Group, sorry, yes, as deputy mayor attended for a while. So yeah, it was very and there was to me to take my turn at co-chairing, and we had a very interesting speaker, Sue, and I should have remembered her name, but she did a presentation, and we you know, from a more of a legal aspect, and so there are a lot of questions asked, and particularly by the Ghana representatives. Yes, we managed to finish in time to get home for the materials.
Speak for yourself. A little further to go.
Yeah, so and that presentation, the lawyer will make available as we put on our website, and so I hope you can have a look at it.
Thank you, councillor Barnett. Any other? Councillor Standen.
As Councillor Nelson mentioned before, I went along with him to the Walkerville Community Forum, hosted by Lucy Hood and Premier Nauskas. I thought it was a fascinating morning. Some of the topics there were enlightening, and they ranged from the aquatic centre through to hydrogen power, through to the Great Northern Water Project, which I'd never heard of. And I learned a lot, and I found them to be a very interesting group of people. We did have to hop over a moat to get there, but it was worthwhile.
Was it castle on the other side?
There was barbed wire and
Thank you, councillor Standen. Okay, thank you for those briefings and reports. Item 14, motions on notice nil. 15 questions with notice nil. Moving on to item 16, confidential items. As recommendation to go into confidence. Can I have a mover? Too many people want. It's good. The enthusiasm is great. I'll try that again. Could I have a mover? Thanks. No one. Do I have a seconder? All those in favour? Okay, so we're going into confidence. So if you're not supposed to be here, then
Spit out of-
We're turning off the live feed.